Welcome to Rebel Justice, a podcast by The View magazine, a platform by and for women in the justice system. I'm Irene Molina, and in today's episode, we bring you the first of a powerful two-part conversation with one of the most extraordinary voices in the global women's movement, Zainab Salbi. Zainab is the co-founder of Women for Women International, a groundbreaking organization that has supported over 500,000 women survivors of war in conflict zones around the world. She is also the co-founder of Daughters for Earth, a global initiative supporting women-led efforts to restore and protect the planet. But Zainab's story isn't just one of global advocacy, it's deeply personal. She grew up in Iraq under Saddam Hussein's regime. She lived through war, escaped an abusive marriage, and began her life's work with nothing but the conviction that women's lives and voices matter. In this episode, you'll hear Zainab in conversation with Anna Shapiro as she opens up about the impact of war, the strength of women, and how getting seriously ill changed the way she sees the world and brought her closer to nature. Let's begin.
I am someone who always knew that I want to dedicate my life for women rights and freedom. And I was lucky to know that at a younger age when I was 16 years old, growing up in Iraq. I guess within that framework, it was always defined by women and conflicts. So I grew up in war and I was very aware and sensitive about how do we understand wars and later peace from a woman's perspective, because we don't discuss wars and peace from a woman's perspective. We always discuss them from men's perspective, which is different. It's just a different perspective. Men are talking about weapons and politics and borders and power and money, and women are talking about how do we keep life going in the midst of war? How do we build life in aftermath of war? They're talking much more about life as opposed to the destruction of life. So that was a very poignant point for me that I realized when I was a child because I was living in war myself. And then when I later on, I realized when I grew up and I realized that there were other wars beside the wars that I grew up in my own home country, Iraq. Um, and that's how I decided to work with Women for Women International, or rather found Women for Women International and work with women survivors of wars. And that there was a pattern that's in conflicts that women face, as in conflicts often impact women severely. Rapes, displacement, food scarcity, all of that. And they do a lot of work to keep life going, as I said. Education, schooling, farming, factories, keep their families alive. And yet they're not acknowledged in any negotiations, most negotiations, even though we know that when women are part of negotiating teams in peace agreements, these peace agreements last much longer. And then they get 10 cents out of every dollar that is humanitarian dollar that is given to all humanitarian work. Well, later on in life, I realized the conflicts, the mother of all conflicts at the moment is the health of Mother Earth. That is much more important than any current conflict going on, whether it is Ukraine or whether it is Sudan or whether it is Gaza. The existential conflict facing or crisis facing humanity is actually climate change. It risks all of us equally. And women in that case are also facing in the same pattern, as in their impact is severely by climate change, more severely um, than their male counterparts. They're doing a lot to address climate change, particularly in nature-based solutions, and then they are getting zero point 0.2 cents out of every US dollar. And so that's what led me in recently found to found Daughters for Earth, is to address that same pattern. So it's I have the fortune of working with women and being inspired by so many amazing women, and truly the heartbreaking of witnessing how the world, in so many ways, which I thought we have evolved, constantly marginalize women in their treatment financially, politically, in solutions, It's the marginalization of women really have made a big steps, and yet the fundamentals are still there, and so much work to be done.
Yeah. Yeah, something I always think about is specifically here from a Western perspective as well. There feels to be the dominant understanding that feminism's been achieved and we've like reached this milestone in a way that then leads to it allows people to negate all the truths that are actually still like occurring in the UK, the US, the dominant Western powers, but also just like throughout the world. I think it's almost allowed people somewhat of a shield to hide behind as though gender equality has been achieved, when in actual fact, as we're seeing, even the few rights that have been won are being continually rolled back, and something needs to be fought for at all times. Yeah, so I was wondering, you spoke about like realizing that the mother issue facing all women is climate change. But I was wondering if you had any personal experiences or specific defining moments that ignited your passion specifically for climate justice, or if it was just like, as you said, the general realization.
Yes, I had a moment, and the moment was I was very sick, and I couldn't live in the city when I was very sick because the sounds of the city was extremely loud in my ears when I was in a very frail position, and I ended up living in the countryside, and actually just really had an encounter with nature in ways, I would had momentary glimpse at it when I was camping before or hiking or whatever, but I had to live exclusively in nature for a year and a half, and I realized when I was sick that because you slow down when you're ill and you're forced to slow down, and my movement was slow and my thinking was slow, and I remembered a teaching that I had from a former teacher, Angela Arian. She said everything about the rhythm of life is slow to medium, except us humans. That we go so fast about life that we stop listening to the actual rhythm of life, to the rhythm of nature, and all that nature has to teach us. And in hindsight, I now tell you, I got lucky to be sick to encounter the rhythm of nature. And from there, I came to I honestly believe that nature saved me, and that it was always there, but I just never paid attention to it, right? Or like pause to say, to be in reverence to it, to be grateful to it. I actually think all of us are guilty, to be honest, because we sort of go about our lives and sort of taking nature for granted, right? Taking earth for granted. We sort of consume without thinking about the ripple effect. We throw garbage and food without thinking about the ripple effect. We farm with just expecting that nature is just going to give us resources forever, and we extract, and it's sort of so there is really no reverence for nature. I actually feel if nature had a song, it will be "I Would Survive." Get out of the door, walk, you're not welcome anymore, because we've been horrible friends. We've been horrible lovers to nature itself. And I just had an awakening moment to realizing nature. And I don't use fancy words at all in terms of, because I had to understand what is climate change and what is happening to Mother Earth. And, for me, all these fancy words, including climate justice, was too abstract for me. It was too theoretical, it was too heady. And it was my experience, which was much more truly a heartfelt experience. It was encountering someone that is nature for the first time in my life in ways I never paid attention to it or seen it before. And then it led me to such deep gratitude to that connection and to her, that I said, I don't understand this climate change. And honestly, I think I'm always grateful for the climate change movement for awakening us to the moment that we are. And in the same breath I say, and we need to use different language to express what is happening to Earth, because it took me 2 years to understand what the heck is going on in terms of climate change, and I'm an educated person, right? To dismantle and decipher the terminologies and all of that, to understand, okay, that is what's happening, to understand that protecting nature itself, leaving nature alone, or protecting the health of the soil and the biodiversity that exists in all over nature, is by itself a third to 37% of all solutions. And yet we don't talk about it, right? We talk so much more about technology and innovation, and when the solution really is very basic, or a good third of the solution is leave earth alone, basically leave part of nature alone, at least to let her regenerate. And so it's sort of where I feel like where humans are so narcissistic even in our solutions, right? Because we think it's our innovation that is going to save us from climate change, as opposed to return back to the basic. And if we just let one third or 37, depends on who you talk with, of nature alone, and that includes rivers and oceans, and that includes, lands and the Amazons and lands in every country and every farm, and that includes allowing all the species to come back and to regenerate and to refurbish themselves. That just doing nothing, no innovation in here, is actually a huge part of the solution that can get us out of the crisis. And what I came to realize that actually women are, are actually in tune to that, are more in tune to protecting nature and to being kinder to nature. And that they're doing a lot, but they're not getting, no one is talking about women's leadership, and they're getting, as I said, minuscule amount of financial support. And that was sort of what precipitated the birth of Daughters for Earth. It was me and many other women, including my co-founder, who basically said, let's do something about this. We can do something about it.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because my next question was going to be, what do you think the unique perspectives women bring to the climate justice movement? And you've, I suppose, just answered that. And it made me think also, it's interesting, while wanting to avoid like drawing specifically gendered boundaries or categories, if you think of who's led the charge in capitalism and the exploitation of earth in favor of wealth generation and innovation, it's always been men at the forefront of that movement. That it's interesting now that you say that women have known or do know a specific way to live with the earth, not an exploitative way, and therefore, as you say, like let it do its healing that's can be very much done if left alone.
And that is by no means to generalize all men or to generalize all women. I'm oversensitive about that. But it does mean, I do believe, that Earth has a song, which means that Earth is alive. It has a heartbeat. It's alive. The species around us are alive. We all can feel them. We all have the choice to slow down and just to be in tune with them. And men and women, I, without stereotyping women, and not all women, I do believe for whatever reason, we are faster, not only, we're just more likely to be in tune to hear that call of others. And this is a theory. You can accuse me of stereotyping or generalizing women, which I may be doing that. But that's not to exclude men being able to do that or tapping into that feeling. Or all of us are capable if we only take the effort. And I have different theories. Maybe women are more less mobile than men at the community level. Maybe women have less resources than men or less opportunities. So they are at the field. They are much more in tune to that heart. Maybe our body, the way it functions, it may be. But that's not to exclude men. It's just we are faster likely to hear that earth song and to connect with it on an emotional level before intellectual level in terms of the solution. And what I'm saying is that emotional connection, if we love again the earth, then our solution could also be kinder, than just all, and our money could be rewired in a different way that is not about extraction, but it's also about giving.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I was wondering, you've again on that kind of touched on why you felt the desire to create a safe funding and community space for women. But I was wondering what challenges you faced in the process of creating Daughters for Earth, if any.
Oh, there's always challenges in any work. There are challenges. There's always logistical challenges. Finding who are these women. It's not been a challenge, but you have to work to find them, right? I find a lot of men in leadership positions in different sectors say, "Well, we cannot find women in this sector," and I'm like, actually, if you just dig a little bit, just try a little bit harder, you will find a woman in all sectors, experts in all fields. It's just at the first value, maybe you don't see them, right? You just have to just just search a little bit. So that's a process to find. And it did activate, a global women's movement, basically, or leaders to find them, to help us find them, identify them, um, and connect with them. Logistically is always hard, making sure that the money is going, finding logistics and aspect to find a way to get them the money at the grassroots level in different ones. And honestly, it's constantly the dance between the heart and the mind. So we're saying we trust women. That's, they are doing that. They are protecting this part of nature that science have already mapped up, and saying it is actually vitally important, that we need to, that they're already there, that they're already doing the work. This is all correct. And in the meantime, we have to also answer to the mind-led folks who are saying, what are the metrics and what are the measurements and where are the, and that dance between the heart and the mind is constantly a challenging dance, right? It's not necessarily an easy flow, and it's both important and it's both needed, right? So on the one hand, we activated process, finding the women and finding and having the decision making of who to get money and how, be led not by myself, but by women conservationists and scientists who are in the field, embedded in the field, dedicated their lives to the protection of the earth. So changing the power dynamic of the meaning of philanthropy, but also in the meantime, trusting women in what they're doing. But in the meantime, also there's the moment we're saying, and we have to measure, and we have to prove that investing in women is actually the most vital investment in terms of how long the dollar goes to, right? So both are true, and the dance between them often presents challenges, but these challenges comes with the job, basically, with any process.
That brings us to the end of part 1 of our conversation with Zainab Salbi. In part 2, we'll hear Zainab talking about the founding of Daughters for Earth and the story behind the Hummingbird Effect, a powerful metaphor for how small acts can drive big change. Until then, thank you for listening to Rebel Justice, a podcast by The View magazine. We hope you found this episode as fascinating as we did. If you'd like to learn more about Zainab and her ongoing work, visit daughtersforearth.org. You can also download issue 13 of The View, which includes an exclusive interview with Zainab. To support our work and receive 4 digital issues and 1 print edition, subscribe to The View magazine for just £20 a year. Make sure to follow us on our social media. We're on Instagram at the_view_magazines. You can also find us on X, formerly Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook.